The Shift podcast, Perspective and Our Power to Change, invites us to expand our lives by changing the lens we see through. Is something different calling you? Do you ever ask yourself, is this all there is? Or have you forgotten why you're even here? Trish and Diane create insightful and empowering conversations about connecting the self, soul, nature, and community. Navigating life by choice rather than circumstance is how we make the shift to expand our humanity. The shift starts now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shift podcast, Perspective and Our Power to Change. We are a part of the Cornelia Stephanie Media Group on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. I'm one of your hosts, Trish Campbell, along with my good friend, Diane McClay. And we're here with episode 21, titled Question Everything. And I'm so excited to get into this conversation with you, Diane, today. And first, I want to open the show, as we always do, by acknowledging the lands on which we settle, the traditional lands of the Indigenous people, and the treaty lands and territories where I live, which is the Anishinaabe and the Mississauga of the Credit, and the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat and Ojibwe Chippewa, and honoring their connection to our Mother Earth, their wisdoms over millennia that have provided us this opportunity to come today, to hold our businesses, to live our lives in these spaces. And we're so fortunate and grateful for that connection, and to honor that in the way we live our lives. And I just wanted to invite you, Diane, to maybe speak to where you're coming from today.
Yeah, thanks, Trish. And I love the intro. It's so perfect, especially as we're coming into spring. So I'm in the Pacific Northwest on the Columbia River, and the Native peoples that I'd like to honor and thank for their stewardship that allowed me to be where I am today. And the lessons I've learned from them include the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, the Lishrem people, the Nez Perce, and this area. Just as a side note, we're naming tribes that are federally recognized. I'm doing some research and homework to discover the ones that are not federally recognized. But it's important to know that river systems, where our highways are, where our cities are, these used to be populations of people where trade, commerce, economy, cultural exchange, festivals all happen. In the Columbia River Gorge, everywhere you look where there's a town, there used to be a band of people who called this home. I like to make sure that we honor the people that are unnamed, because they're the ones who actually are truly forgotten. The named tribes, the named bands of people are recognized at the federal level and at the state level, and there are benefits to those people as a result of that naming. But there are a lot of people out there who are unnamed. And part of what we do in the show is we shift the perspective to make sure that we incorporate the named and the unnamed.
Right, that's so important. And I do want to add on to that, that even though a lot of them are federally recognized here in the US, you're speaking of, but in Canada too, but that recognition, it goes beyond that recognition. It goes like to speak to what you said about learning, doing the research yourself and learning what happened on the lands that you're living before it became the city that you're living in, for example, and really taking ownership and personal responsibility about that. So, and that is why, I'm so excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today, because it's the essence of what we're doing on the shift. And the title of our show is Question Everything. And that may seem like we're skeptical, or it's not from a conspiracy theorist kind of point of view or anything like that we're all, feeling and hearing and receiving out there. But it's more about, looking at, I felt like after the last show, it was just a natural point of kind of hovering in this place of, why are we talking about having that inner journey or taking that inner journey in the first place? Like, why is it so important to do that? And what we can learn about ourselves, and how that learning about ourselves can then help us to make change in the world. And it really comes back to what we always say, it all begins and ends with us, because the real change does happen on the individual level. The real change around the world, the collective change happens with what we do individually. Like they always say, and we don't like to hear it, the outer world reflects our inner world, what's going on inside. And sometimes that's not so comfortable to accept that truth, because there might be parts that we don't want to face those truths. But we're really talking about bringing this from the ethereal into the tangible, and how we can apply this, like talking about the why, but also how we can apply this in our days, in our lives, and what we can do to go beyond just what we're being fed, what we're receiving as quote unquote truth, and digging for a deeper truth. And today, April 1st, it couldn't be a more perfect day to do this. So I have something to say about that, but I don't know if you.
Well, you just teed it up, and I was going to say the picture behind me, for people who can't see me, is I have a picture of a wooden bridge going across a creek with a stone encroachment to it, and it's to signify bridging the gap between the known and the unknown, between our viewpoint and the viewpoint of others. Perspective is about shifting how you see things. So perception is the value that we add to the things that we see, and perspective is the position from which we see it, the lens from which we look through. And so April Fool's Day, I'm sure you did your homework, question everything. One of the things we talked about on the show is one of the easiest places to start about questioning everything is the stories that were being told about celebrations or calendar events. We just had St. Patrick's Day, and you reminded us that perhaps we should be more mindful about the origin of it. And it's not just, drinking green beer and, wearing green. So April Fool's Day, nobody is a fool who tunes into TTR. You cannot walk away from TTR without learning something new or without being challenged to have a different perspective. So we appreciate everybody making the choice. For me, I got curious about what's the origin of April Fool's Day.
Awesome.
And I was not surprised to find out that there's actually various definitions, and there's at least 4 different perspectives on where it originated. One being that when the Roman calendar shifted to from where January 1st became the start of the new year after Caesar died, then there were some religious holdouts who said, hey, we're not going to honor January 1st. We're going to honor the original part of spring as our previous calendar. We're going to stick to that. That's one version. Another version is that is related to the vernal equinox, where it just kind of represented the chaos of the weather of the time period. And I'm sure you've done some homework on it, but the point is that when you get 3 different definitions about something that we commonly celebrate, it's reason to pause and say, why?
Right.
What's different? What do I need to know? What should I explore more? And before I forget, I want to make sure that we tag in that you used the word skeptic earlier, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, but I don't want to forget it. The skeptic side, the needing to have proof, comes from the ego side.
Yeah.
Right. And the curiosity piece comes from our soul. And I know you're going to talk about that.
Yeah, that's what I mean, we kind of had this little preemptive conversation about it, and that, and even in my mind thinking about how we would talk about what we would talk about in this show. And we think, as soon as you hear the word question everything, you think skepticism, and it's not really skepticism. Skepticism is, or I thought, what is skepticism? Skepticism is coming from the ego, because it's almost like a need to be right. And the curiosity is coming, I feel like that is a softer, more natural way to understand something, coming from the soul. So one of the reasons why, and it's just kind of sparking right now that we're doing this, is because we're shifting from, and in the times, everything that's happening around us and all these energies, and you may be aware of it and you may not, but we're shifting from an ego-driven society to a soul-driven society. We're there's a lot of us that have been awakened to, we can be in our higher consciousness. We can evolve beyond what we ever thought we could. And so that is why we're having the conversation about going within and understanding that inner connection and that inner wisdom, and having that be our guidance. And going back to what you said about the three different definitions about April Fool's Day. And there's one I was also taught in my French class, and this goes back to the Gregorian calendar, switching from the Julian calendar. And there's a French, if anyone has any French influences or is French, you know, the Poisson d'Avril, and that is it's making a mockery of those who were still not accepting of the new Gregorian calendar and being gullible, or making a mockery of them and sticking a paper fish on their back. So that still is like a thing talked about today, and it has evolved. April Fool's Day has evolved into this big marketing campaign. Now it's a marketing opportunity for people to put out these ridiculous marketing campaigns that don't make any sense, just to kind of fool people. And that's a more of a, but what I want to go back to is why we're having this conversation is that, so when you have those three different definitions, and there's going to be always those different perspectives, having that inner connection to your soul and that inner guidance will help you discern what feels good for you. Because for me, when I read that about April Fool's Day, I was like, and again, spring equinox is the true new year. The new moon in Aries this time, which is today, by the way, too, is what has always been the astrological new year. And naturally, because we are part of nature, that's what feels right for a lot of people, to not in the dead of winter start something new, because that's when naturally we're in hibernation. And then in the springtime, it makes more sense to have a fresh start and all of these things. So this is what is so interesting about when you take a moment to take what we're talking about here and do a little research. And I'm not saying Google has all the answers, but it gives you an idea of beyond what we're taught in school, because in school we're not taught necessary. We're taught we're taught the stereotypes, the stories of, that our parents were taught, that their parents were taught and passed down and never questioned. And that's why we're saying question everything.
I want to jump in here, because when you shared the French version of where paper fish were pinned to someone's back for not accepting the new calendar as the state or the leader wanted them to do, I hear shaming. I hear bullying. I actually hear, how can we control the masses? How can we get these irregulars in line? Mm-hmm. How can we, if we can't punish them, how can we make them feel like they're not a part of the whole, right? And, yes. and it sort of begs the question, right? I love a good joke as much as the next person, right? But then there also has to be you have to understand, what is the purpose of the joke? Do you already have a good working relationship with your coworkers and humor is a part of the workplace? And now it's just kind of a way that you bond, where you bring people together over a joke? Or, excuse me, as you're saying, is it a way to show your intelligence over someone else? Is it a way to control someone else? Is it a way to make your ego better than mm-hmm. someone else? And when you say that somebody didn't accept the calendar dates as the hierarchy wanted them to accept it, then public guilting is an easy way to corral a majority of the people. And then when people feel bad about themselves, and your book, Self Love Me, talks about that, when you feel bad about yourself, you sort of fall into this trap of wanting to be accepted, wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be valued by other people. And what I hear is now the system has its hooks in you, and it has a way to control you. And that may not have been the intent, but as I kind of hear no different than putting, pink triangles on Jewish Holocaust victims, or yellow stars on Jewish Holocaust victims. Having a way of identifying somebody who sticks out and doesn't conform is a deeper rooted meaning to one of the origins of April Fool's Day. And it's important to kind of think about that, I think. How is that showing up in today's society?
Yeah, that's so true. It's not just necessarily a group of people making fun of, try to control. That's the system in which we've evolved in, is having that suppression of, if you're not conforming a certain way, then that is pushed to the outer fringe and it's made fun of. Just like, and I love where we're going with this, but there is another point of, like, there's so many examples we can use around this, being told something our entire lives, and then you learn something new, and it's like, I've always had, so the number 13, for example, everyone knows about Friday the 13th, and that it's a bad luck number, but it's always been my favorite number. And the number 13 is the number of, in universal, so numbers have an energy attached to them, universal energy, and the number 13 represents integration. So it's, once you've reached all the levels of consciousness, it's the integration of the consciousness. But because that represents a threat to the system that wants to keep us participating in it, and our higher consciousness, our greatest potential that we can possibly achieve, poses a threat to the system, then that has been given a narrative of bad luck, bad, everything bad happens on Friday the 13th. And when actually 13 is one of the luckiest numbers, one of the most powerful numbers. So this is just an example of how you can just, make a list of all the things that we do as a society, and start going through the list and doing your research and seeing, is there something behind this beyond what I already knew? And where I wanted to take this was that those things that have been placed on the fringe because they're not part of what the system wants us to be knowing, they're not allowed to be in certain space, like spirituality, for example, like the inner journey we're talking about. It's a spiritual journey. And so why is that something that's not really talked about in spaces like school, like the workplace? We're not taught this in school. And so that is why we're going back to this question, everything, and why it's so important to, this is how we can reclaim that power that we're talking about, that we give away. We don't even realize it's so subtle, because we just want to belong in society. That's part of our need as a human.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head and saying yes, and it's kind of one of these things that I was on a mastermind call this morning, and the presenter was talking about 5 levels of love. And let me grab it real quick. Sorry, it was just out of reach off camera. She was saying that there's more than 5 levels, but what we talked about today was divine love, which comes kind of from the head, the crown chakra, the universal knowledge. Soul love, which comes from the heart, which is what you and I are talking about today, and self-love, which you talk about in your book. And then there's 2 more called ego love. And we are so driven for validation. This is what Lori was saying today, is that, we chase the ego love and the romantic love. And these are her words, not mine, but it really hit me. And I thought it was actually tied into what we're talking about. We spend so much of our day and our energy and our time chasing the fulfillment of the things that show us that we're good, that we're valid, that we're meaningful, that we contribute. And those are actually the lower vibrational levels of love. If we focused on self-love, we focused on our soul love, how we're connected to our universe and to our nature and to, our community. And we really try to hone in on that divine love, that power that's within us, that is always present and no one can take it away. The other 2 will show up. We'll find that romantic partner we're looking for. We'll find that business partner who wants to engage with us. We'll find that client that's aligned with us. But we spend so much of our time trying to align to the thing that actually takes us out of alignment. It's so,
I love that you just brought this into the conversation, because that is exactly what this is about. It's we're missing those 3 levels of love in our world right now. Like we're operating from that ego place, the ego love, and ego is also attached to power and control, and that's what's being at the forefront. That's what's in focus right now. We see it happening, playing out in all different ways, like We could have a whole nother show just about that, but this, going back to this conversation and tying it into, questioning everything, and why is it that, so yeah, why is it that why is it that we haven't been in those three, focusing on those three levels of love in every aspect, that, like you said, that divine love that's always with us, that inner light, like, why, let's say, for example, why isn't that taught in schools? Why isn't that, you allowed in the workplace, like that? Why is our inner light, our core essence, not allowed in a space? And why are we then, we're asked to live and operate from mask place, like from a mask being, and it's not our true self.
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and we don't have the time in this show to go into it, so maybe we extend the conversation into the next show. But
Yeah.
The first thing I think of is that there's a lot of iterations of the why not, right? We've gone through political incorrectness. People don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to offend somebody. But there's, I think, when you strip all of those superficial things away, I think we don't have the confidence or the courage to state what we need or want in a workplace. We've been taught that we can't. That goes back to control.
Yeah.
I think there's so many layers, but what our listeners can do today is, we're not asking you to shift your opinion from 180 degrees.
Right.
Like if you just come into neutral and hang out in, like if you're vehemently opposed to something, I'm not asking you to come to the other side and be suddenly marching for it.
Right.
I am asking you to say, why am I? And then where did I get my information?
Mm-hmm.
And then is there another perspective I can explore so I can be more informed? And then can I be curious about somebody else's view or somebody else's opinion? If that's all you do and you just come a notch or two closer to neutral, then I think that when we are in the fringe, we're stuck in the fringe, and we're less likely to have the confidence, the courage, or the ability to make the choice to start really honing in on what really matters. So come in from the fringe, start feeling different things, start asking yourself, is this in alignment with me? And then if it's not, how do I get there? And then we just have to start asking for it. This is a new day. It's a new world, and it's time that the old system gets retired and the new system starts being brought in.
Yeah. And that is, that's why we're having this conversation, but that is something that it does require us to have courage and to cultivate that, but that again is driven from the soul level. It's driven from that intentional connection, the proactive time we spend to cultivate that connection and that inner knowing. And it's meant to be shared and expressed, and it feels, I know it well, it feels uncomfortable to be in that space of being the only one, or being afraid of being rejected or whatever that is. And so just kind of, like you said, hovering on the fringe still, because that's where it's comfortable. But it's about, if we all start kind of like normalizing this kind of natural way of our being, of not having to stand so firm in our beliefs, but coming to that place of neutrality around everything, and maybe taking the time to ask ourselves questions. We talked about that before. I was never one to ask the questions. I've never been naturally curious, or maybe I am naturally curious and I shut that off because I thought I believed it was bad to be questioning something. It was either annoying, or I was going against the grain, or I was misbehaving. And so that kind of sticks with you. And I think it's having the courage to step beyond that, because that's just our ego wanting to protect itself again. That's the fear that resides in the ego, where the courage resides in the soul. And we can cultivate that courage.
Well, and I think that's the key, right? And I think that the key is to really make sure that we're starting to connect to the soul. And 3 questions I ask myself every day is, how do I feel? Is it do I like how I'm feeling? And if the answer is no, what can I do to change it?
Yeah.
I am the only person who can control me. I get to choose how I feel. I get to choose who I spend my time with. I get to choose what I expect in my workplace. And I want to give a quick shout out to Cornelia Stephanie and the Media Group app, because one of the things that's really unique about our masterminds is the first 15 minutes, we go around the room and we say, how do you feel?
Yeah.
She
I love
asks
that.
everybody. It's not like, okay, let's hit the agenda and let's do the masculine energy and let's get this shit done and, let's go down the list. We create a lot of things and we collaborate, but we also allow people to be their human self. And if the first step is to acknowledge that I feel a certain way, give yourself some time to be in it, and then give yourself a stopping point and say, okay, now I've had my pity party or my anger or whatever. And now I'm going to take steps to move myself into the direction that I want to move and feed my soul the way I need it to be fed. We have control over that.
And that's how we make change, because we're doing it and we're checking in with ourselves first, and we're cultivating that relationship with ourselves, and then holding space for ourselves, asking ourselves how we feel, and then we're able to do that with others and be ready for the real answer and to hold space for the real answer. If it's not such a great day, or I'm not doing well, it's okay to be not okay. And that, I think we need to continue this conversation in another episode. And it's so good, that's the space that we're in the KS Media Group, because we're creating it in that space, and we're creating that energy, and that's emanating out into the world where we all go into our individual spaces as well. And that's how change happens, is we just start doing it. We just start being it.
Yeah, and I'm going to put a plug in for every week we have a universal question that we're trying to engage our audience and try to help create that shift. And we encourage people to download the Cornelia Stephanie Media Group app. I think it's called the New House app. We did a name change, but bottom line is, go to your Google Play Store, look for KS Media Group, download it. You can get Trish, you can get me, you can have access to the practitioners and healers we have in our group. And as always, you get to create the shift that you want, and it starts with you.
Yeah, start asking questions if you're not.
My two favorites are what if and why not. So we're going to say thank you for tuning in for this particular Friday. As always, we're here for you, and we'd love to hear from you in the app. Take care. Have a great Friday.
Thank you for listening to the Shift Podcast, where perspective and our power to change intersect. Slowing down to look at things from a different angle is necessary to effect positive change. You hold the power to transform yourself and your life. It is already inside you, and it's within reach. Clarity comes from awareness. Momentum comes from choice. Healing, growth, and transformation happen on the Shift Podcast, the first and third Fridays at 12:30 p.m. Pacific. For more information, go to invibe.ca or dianemcclay.com.